3 months had passed since the Battle of Varus IV, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Ambassador Daniel Cole stood at the same viewing window where his shuttle had once approached the Kethran Imperial Station. But this time, he was not a representative of a minor species coming to receive demands. He was the leader of a diplomatic delegation that would reshape civilization among the stars. The station still hung in space, massive and impressive. But the Kethran flags that had once flown from every communication tower were gone. In their place flew the banner of the Coalition of Free Worlds, a circle of stars representing the alliance that humanity had forged from the ashes of conquest. Daniel's shuttle docked, and he walked through corridors that he remembered from that terrible day when Vorath had delivered his ultimatum. Now those corridors were filled with representatives from a dozen species. Verlani workers moved freely, no longer slaves but equal partners in the new order. Dothic diplomats discussed trade agreements with Moravian merchants. Crystal and Accord engineers worked alongside human technicians to rebuild the V Station's damaged systems. The Imperial Chamber had been transformed into the Coalition Assembly Hall. The rising tiers still held hundreds of seats, but they were now occupied by elected representatives rather than imperial officials. At the center of the chamber, where Daniel had once stood alone before the Kethran throne, there was now a circular table where all species sat as equals. Daniel took his seat among the human delegation. Beside him sat Admiral Grace Mitchell, who had been promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of all Coalition military forces. On his other side sat Patricia Lane, now Director General of Coalition Intelligence. Katie Brooks was present too, wearing the insignia of a newly created position, Commander of Special Operations. Chief Engineer Samuel Park had declined any official title. He preferred to remain at his research station, developing new technologies that would help the Coalition protect itself. But his achievements were recognized by all, and his name was spoken with respect throughout the Allied worlds. Captain Laura Bennett had survived the collision that crippled the Imperial Wrath. She had spent 2 months recovering from her injuries. Today she sat in the visitors' gallery, her left arm still in a healing brace. The Coalition had awarded her the highest medal for valor, and her name had become a symbol of human courage and sacrifice. Captain Henry Cole had led the stealth operation that started the war, and he had led similar missions throughout the campaign that followed. Now he commanded a new outpost on Varus IV, the border world that had become a symbol of humanity's determination. The world that had once been threatened with destruction was now the site of the Coalition's main military academy. The session began with formal recognition of new member states. 3 of the former Kethran subject species had already joined the Coalition. Today, 4 more were being welcomed. The representatives signed treaties of mutual defense and cooperation. Applause filled the chamber. After each signing dot, then came the moment that everyone had been waiting for. High Commander Vorath was brought into the chamber under guard. He was no longer the towering figure who had threatened humanity with extinction. His scales had lost their dark luster. His ceremonial scars seemed like marks of failure rather than victory. He walked with the heavy steps of someone whose pride had been completely broken. The tribunal that would judge him consisted of representatives from 7 species that the Kethran had conquered. Daniel served as the human representative. He felt no joy in seeing Vorath brought low, only a grim satisfaction that justice was being done. High Commander Vorath, the tribunal chair, a Verlani elder named Chirik, announced, "You stand accused of unauthorized military action, resulting in the deaths of over 200,000 Kethran soldiers. You are accused of launching an aggressive war against a sovereign civilization. You are accused of threatening genocide against the human species. How do you answer these charges?" Vorath raised his head slowly. His yellow eyes swept across the chamber, taking in the representatives of species that his empire had once ruled with absolute power. "I answered that I followed the traditions of my people," he said. "The strong rule the weak. This has been our way for 1,000 years. And do you see now the flaw in that philosophy?" Chirrut asked. Vorath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. "I see that strength is not only measured in ships and weapons. I see that a species that can think and adapt is more dangerous than one that can only follow orders." He looked directly at Daniel. "I underestimated humanity. That was my greatest failure." The tribunal deliberated for 3 hours. In the end, they sentenced Vorath to life imprisonment on a neutral world, where he would spend his remaining years studying the history of the species his empire had crushed. It was a punishment designed to force understanding rather than simply to cause suffering. After the tribunal concluded, Daniel remained in the chamber. Most of the other delegates had left, but Admiral Mitchell stayed with him. "It feels strange," Daniel said. 3 months ago, I stood in this room and heard him to destroy everything I loved. Now he is broken, and his empire is scattered. "The Kethran Empire has split into 7 independent states," Mitchell replied. "None of them have the power to threaten anyone. 5 of those states have already requested membership in the coalition. Former conquerors asking to join an alliance led by humans. The galaxy truly has changed." Mitchell nodded. "It changed because we refused to accept the future they planned for us. It changed because we showed the conquered peoples that resistance was possible. It changed because we proved that size and numbers matter less than courage and adaptability." Daniel watched through the viewport as ships moved peacefully around the station. Human vessels flew beside Vrillani traders and Dothic patrol craft. Crystal and Accord ships communicated through pulses of light with coalition command centers. It was a scene that would have been impossible just a year ago. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. "Nothing lasts forever," Mitchell said. "But what we have built here is stronger than the Kethran Empire ever was. They ruled through fear and force. We lead through cooperation and shared purpose." She smiled slightly. "And we have shown the galaxy what happens when humanity is threatened. I suspect no one will make that mistake again for a very long time." Later that evening, Daniel attended a reception in the station's observation dome. Representatives from all coalition species mingled freely. The atmosphere was one of hope and celebration. Chirrut approached Daniel with 2 glasses of Vrillani ceremonial wine. Daniel accepted one with a nod of thanks. "Ambassador Cole," Chirrut said, "I must confess something to you. When your Lieutenant Commander Brooks first approached me on Meridian Hub, I did not believe humanity could succeed. I thought you were fools rushing toward your own destruction." "Many thought the same," Daniel replied, "including many humans. But you did not think so. You and your admiral and your engineers and soldiers. You believed that you could change the universe." Chirrut's compound eyes reflected the light of distant stars. "My people have waited 200 years for freedom. Generations lived and died under Kethran rule. We had given up hope." The Vrillani raised its glass. "Then you came, and everything changed." Daniel raised his own glass. "We could not have done it alone. The rebellion across Kethran space, the intelligence from conquered peoples, the willingness to fight together. Victory belonged to all of us." "Perhaps," Chirrut agreed. "But it was humanity that sparked the flame. It was humanity that showed us what was possible. And it is humanity that the galaxy will remember as the species that taught the Kethran Empire a lesson it will never forget." They drank together as the stars turned slowly beyond the VIEWPOR to far below. On the surface of Varus IV, Henry Cole stood at the dedication ceremony for the new Coalition Military Academy. Young cadets from a dozen species stood in formation, ready to begin their training. They would learn to fight together, to think together, to protect each other against any threat that might arise. On Earth, celebrations continued for a third day. Humanity had not only survived, but had risen to lead an alliance of free peoples. Children who had been born under the shadow of Kethran threats would grow up in a galaxy where humans were respected and admired. And in his cell on a distant world, the former High Commander Vorath began reading the first of many thousands of pages, documenting the civilizations his empire had destroyed. He would spend the rest of his life learning about the cultures he had crushed, the histories he had erased, the futures he had stolen. It was a fitting end for someone who had threatened to erase humanity from existence, because humanity did not erase easily. Humanity fought back. Humanity remembered. And humanity made sure the galaxy would never forget. The Battle of Varus 4 raged across 1,000,000 kilometers of space. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Missiles left trails of fire as they sought their targets. Ships died in brilliant explosions that faded quickly in the vacuum. Captain Lavra Bennett commanded the carrier Endurance from her position at the center of the human formation. Her ship had taken heavy damage in the first wave of attacks. 3 of her launch bays were destroyed. Half her fighter squadrons were gone. Fires burned on 6 decks, and her chief engineer had told her that the reactor was close to critical failure, but the Endurance was still fighting. Lavra would not stop until her ship was dust or the Kethran were defeated. "Captain," her tactical officer called out, "the enemy flagship is repositioning. It looks like Vorath is trying to establish a new communication link with his scattered fleet." Lavra studied her display. The Imperial Wrath was moving away from the main battle, its escorts forming a protective shell around it. If Vorath managed to restore communications with his captains, the Kethran could coordinate again. The confusion that had helped the humans survive would end. She made her decision in less than a second. "All hands," Laura announced over the ship's speakers. "This is the captain. I am ordering all non-essential personnel to the escape pods. We are going to ram the enemy flagship." Silence followed her words. Then her first officer, Commander Nathan Price, stepped to her side. "With respect, Captain, I am staying." "Nathan, there is no need for both of us to die. There is no way I am letting you have all the glory," Nathan replied with a grim smile. "Besides, someone needs to keep the ship running while you do the driving." Lavra looked at her bridge crew. One by one, they shook their heads. No one was leaving. "Very well," Lavra said quietly. "Let us go make history." The Endurance accelerated toward the Imperial Wrath. Kethran escort ships turned to intercept, their weapons firing desperately at the charging carrier. Laura's remaining fighters launched one final time, throwing themselves at the escorts to clear a path for their mothership. On the bridge of the Imperial Wrath, High Commander Vorath watched the damaged carrier rushing toward him. "What are they doing?" his weapons officer asked, confusion clear in his voice. "That ship is crippled. They cannot hope to destroy us." Vorath understood before his officers did. "They are not trying to destroy us. They are trying to board us, or to disable us." He slammed his fist against his command chair. "All escorts, concentrate fire on that carrier. Destroy it before it reaches us." But the human fighters were in the way. They died by the dozens, their small craft no match for Kethran warships. But each one they destroyed was a second of delay. Each second brought the Endurance closer. Lavra watched the flagship grow larger on her view screen. Warning alarms screamed throughout her ship. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 12. Engine 2 had exploded. Life support was failing. "Target the main hangar bay," she ordered. "If we hit their communication arrays directly, we will not do enough damage. But if we go through the hangar, we can reach their central systems." "Understood," Nathan said. "Adjusting course." The Endurance was close enough now that Lara could see individual details on the Kethran flagship. She could see the massive hangar doors opening as Varath tried to launch his own fighters. She could see the point defense guns tracking her ship. "Brace for impact," she said calmly. The Endurance struck the Imperial Wrath at full speed. The carrier's bow crumpled like paper as it drove deep into the hangar bay. The impact sent shockwaves through both ships. Bulkheads collapsed. Fires erupted. Thousands of Kethran soldiers were killed in an instant as the human ship tore. Through their vessel's heart, Lara was thrown from her chair. She felt bones break as she hit the deck. Through the pain, she saw her view screen showing the inside of the Kethran hangar, now filled with the wreckage of her ship. "Nathan," she croaked. Her first officer lay nearby, blood running from a wound on his head. But he was alive. "We made it," he said weakly. "We actually made it." The collision had destroyed the Imperial Rad's main communication array. Varath had lost his last reliable link to his fleet. Outside, the battle continued. The Kethran ships, already confused by the loss of their relay network, now saw their flagship crippled and silent. Panic began to spread through their ranks. Admiral Mitchell seized the moment. "All ships, press the attack. Show no mercy." On the surface of Varus 4, Samuel Park had deployed a ground-based version of his quantum disruptors. The massive weapons fired pulses of energy into space, creating zones of sensor blindness that the Kethran could not penetrate. Human pilots used these zones to appear and disappear like ghosts, striking from unexpected angles and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Lieutenant Commander Katie Brooks led a boarding team onto a Kethran battlecruiser that had been disabled by concentrated fire. Her team of 32 soldiers fought through corridors filled with Kethran warriors. Taking ground meter by bloody meter, Katie had trained for years in close combat. But nothing had prepared her for fighting the Kethran hand-to-hand. They were bigger, stronger, and their scales could turn aside all but the most powerful weapons. 3 of her soldiers died in the first minute of fighting, but humans had something the Kethran did not: the ability to improvise. "Fall back to the intersection," Katie ordered. "Funnel them toward us." Her soldiers retreated in good order, drawing the Kethran into a narrow corridor. When the enemy was packed tightly together, Katie detonated the explosive charges her team had planted on the walls. The blast killed dozens of Kethran. The survivors stumbled forward, dazed and disoriented. Katie's team cut them down with precise fire. Room by room, deck by deck, they fought their way to the bridge. When they finally reached it, only 12 of Katie's original 32 soldiers remained. But they had captured a Kethran battlecruiser intact. "Admiral Mitchell," Katie reported over her communicator, "the enemy vessel is ours. Shall I turn its weapons on the remaining Kethran ships?" "Negative," Mitchell replied. "Hold your position and guard that ship. The war records it carries will be valuable." There was satisfaction in her voice. "Besides, I think our friends are about to end this." As Katie watched through the captured ship's viewports, she saw Kethran vessels beginning to break formation. Some were fleeing. Others were surrendering, their captains broadcasting desperate pleas for mercy. Without Varath's commands, without the guidance of Imperial Command, they did not know what to do. The Kethran were not beaten because they lacked courage. They were not beaten because their ships were weaker. They were beaten because their entire civilization had forgotten how to think independently, and humanity had just reminded them why that was a fatal weakness. "High Commander." Varath stood on the ruined bridge of the Imperial Wrath. Around him, Kethran officers worked frantically to restore some function to their crippled vessel. Through the shattered viewports, he could see human ships moving among his scattered fleet, accepting surrenders and destroying those who still tried to fight. "High Commander," one of his officers said, Captain Kethis of the destroyer wing requests permission to retreat. Vorath closed his eyes. He had led 400 ships to this battle. Less than 100 remained functional. The rest were destroyed or captured. "Signal all ships," he said heavily. "Ceasefire. I am requesting a ceasefire with the human commander." The message went out on whatever communication channels still worked. Within minutes, the guns fell silent across the battlefield. Admiral Mitchell appeared on Vorath's damaged screen. She looked tired but triumphant. "High Commander," she said, "I accept your ceasefire. Your surviving ships will stand down and prepare for inspection. You personally will surrender yourself to my custody. These terms are not negotiable." Vorath wanted to refuse. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to fight to the death rather than accept such shame. But he looked at the remnants of his fleet, and he thought of the Kethran soldiers who would die if he continued this pointless battle. "I accept," he said. The Battle of Varus 4 was over. Humanity had won, but the war was not finished. Across the Kethran Empire, rebellion still raged. The old order was crumbling, and a new era was about to begin. Day 28 arrived with the cold light of distant stars. High Commander Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Imperial Wrath, and watched as 400 warships formed up around him. It was the largest fleet the Empire had assembled in 50 years, and it would crush the humans like insects beneath a boot. "Signal from Imperial Command," his communications officer reported. "The Emperor sends his blessing for our campaign. He expects total victory within 10 days. Vorath allowed himself a rare smile. "Tell the Emperor that I will bring him the human homeworld as a gift. Their species will serve as laborers in our mines for the next 1,000 years." The fleet jumped to faster than light travel. A wall of destruction heading toward human space. They did not know that 12 small ships were already behind them. Captain Henry Cole sat in the command chair of the Silent Runner, watching his sensor display with unblinking eyes. His ship floated in the shadow of a dead moon, 3,000 kilometers from Relay Station 7. The station was a massive structure bristling with antennae and surrounded by 6 patrol ships. "All teams report ready," his first officer whispered. "Quantum disruptors are charged." Henry checked the chronometer on his display. Across Kethran space, 11 other captains were doing the same thing, watching the same countdown reach 0. "Fire," Henry said. 6 pulses of quantum energy shot from the Silent Runner and struck the relay station. The effect was immediate and devastating. The station's lights flickered, dimmed, and then began flashing in random patterns. Its communication arrays started broadcasting noise instead of signals. Every message passing through the station became corrupted garbage. The patrol ships reacted instantly, turning toward the source of the attack. But Henry was already moving, his ship accelerating toward the edge of the system where they could jump to safety. "Relay Station 7 is down," his communications officer reported. "We are receiving confirmation from the other teams. Stations 1 through 12 are all disabled." Henry felt a fierce joy burning in his chest. The first blow had been struck, aboard the Imperial Wrath. High Commander Vorath was reviewing battle plans when his communications officer turned pale beneath his scales. "High Commander," the officer said, his voice shaking, "we have lost contact with Imperial Command." Vorath's head snapped around. "What do you mean, lost contact?" "Our signals are not reaching the relay network. We are receiving only static. I have tried 17 different frequencies. Nothing works." Vorath stood slowly. This was impossible. The Kethran communication network had never failed in 300 years of operation. "Contact the other ships in our fleet. Determine if this is a local problem." The officer worked his console for several minutes. "High Commander, I can reach ships within direct communication range, but anything beyond that is impossible." The entire relay network appears to be down. Before Vorath could respond, another officer called out. "Aye, Commander, we are receiving emergency signals from multiple sectors. There are reports of attacks on communication stations throughout the Empire." Vorath felt something he had not felt in decades: uncertainty. The humans did this? "Unknown, High Commander. We cannot verify anything without the relay network." Vorath gripped the railing in front of him so hard that the metal bent. "It does not matter. We proceed with the invasion. Signal all ships to continue toward human space." "Sir, our battle doctrine requires authorization from Imperial Command for major engagements." "I am giving authorization," Vorath growled. "I am High Commander. My word is law." The officer hesitated. Kethran military culture did not allow for independent action. Every captain, every commander, every soldier was trained to wait for orders from above. Vorath was the highest military authority present, but without confirmation from the Emperor, many captains would be nervous about proceeding. Vorath saw the hesitation spreading through his bridge crew. He made a decision that would later be called the worst mistake in Kethran military history. "All ships will proceed to human space and destroy everything they find," he broadcast to the fleet. "I take full responsibility. Any captain who does not obey will be executed when we return home." The fleet continued forward, but Vorath could sense the unease in his commanders. They were not used to acting without the constant guidance of Imperial Command. They were trained to follow, not to think. The humans were very different. On 17 worlds across Kethran space, the signal went out. Katie Brooks had done her work well. The Verlani rose first, their workers sabotaging the factories where they had been enslaved for generations. The Dothic followed, their fighters attacking the Kethran garrisons on their water worlds. The Crystalline Accord moved last but most effectively, their unique biology allowing them to infiltrate Kethran, computer systems, and shut down power grids across entire continents. Within hours, a quarter of the Kethran Empire was in open rebellion. Vorath received fragmented reports as his fleet approached human space. A world in rebellion here. A garrison overrun there. But without the relay network, he could not get a clear picture of what was happening. He could not coordinate with other Kethran forces. He could not request reinforcements. He was blind in a galaxy suddenly full of enemies. Admiral Grace Mitchell waited at the border world of Varys 4 with 43 human warships. It was a pitiful force compared to the Kethran armada bearing down on her. But she had two advantages that Vorath did not understand. First, every one of her captains could think for themselves. They did not need orders to adapt to changing situations. They had trained for years to make decisions under pressure. Second, she knew the Kethran were coming. Her scouts had been tracking the enemy fleet for days, sending reports through quantum-encrypted channels that the disrupted relay network could not intercept. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "we are receiving a direct transmission from the Kethran flagship. High Commander Vorath wishes to speak with you." Mitchell smiled coldly. "Put him through." Vorath's face appeared on her main screen. The Kethran leader looked angry, his scales flushed dark with rage. "Human Commander," Vorath said, "your tricks have bought you nothing. You have damaged our communications, but my fleet is intact. You have encouraged rebellion among our subjects, but rebellions can be crushed. Surrender now, and I will spare your civilian populations." Mitchell stood straight and clasped her hands behind her back. "High Commander, I am going to give you one chance to avoid the destruction of your fleet. Turn around. Go home. Tell your Emperor that humanity is not worth the cost of conquest." Vorath laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You have 40 ships against 400. You are not in a position to make demands. I have 40 ships that can fight without someone holding their hands," Mitchell replied. "You have 400 that are lost without orders from above. Let us see which matters more. She cut the transmission. Voreth stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he turned to his weapons officer. All ships, he commanded. Attack formation. Destroy them all. The Battle of Varus 4 began with fire and fury. Kethran warships poured energy into the human defensive line. 6 human vessels died in the first hour. Their crews vaporized in instants of terrible violence. But the humans did not break. They did not retreat. They fought with a desperate courage that the Kethran had never seen before, and slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Kethran captains waited for orders that never came. They held formation when they should have adapted. They followed doctrine that did not account for an enemy who refused to behave as expected. The humans did none of these things. They fought as individuals united by a common purpose. When one ship fell, others covered the gap. When opportunities appeared, captains seized them without waiting for authorization. 9 hours into the battle, with half his fleet disabled or destroyed, Commander Voreth finally understood what he was facing. Humanity was not a weak species waiting to be conquered. Humanity was a force that would burn the galaxy down before it would kneel. Lieutenant Commander Katie Brooks had spent 6 years in special operations, but she had never been on a mission like this one. She sat in a crowded bar on Meridian Hub, a neutral trading station that floated in the space between empires. Around her, dozens of alien species drank and gambled, and made deals that would never appear in any official record. She was looking for 3 specific contacts. If she failed to find them, humanity would face the Kethran Armada alone. The first contact found her. A Vrillani merchant slid into the seat across from her, its compound eyes reflecting the dim lights of the bar. The Vrillani were insectoid creatures with 4 arms and bodies covered in hard chitin. The Kethran had conquered their homeworld 200 years ago. "You are the human," the Vrillani said through its translator. Its voice clicked and buzzed. "Word spreads quickly here. You seek allies against the Empire. I seek friends who share common interests," Katie replied carefully. The Vrillani made a sound like dry leaves rustling. Katie had studied enough to know this was laughter. "Common interests, yes. The Kethran have given many species common interests." It leaned closer. "My people remember freedom. We have waited for someone brave enough or foolish enough to challenge our masters. Tell me what you propose." Katie spoke quietly for 10 minutes. When she finished, the Vrillani was silent for a long moment. "This could work," it finally said. "Or it could bring destruction upon all of us. But we have lived under Kethran boots for 2 centuries. Perhaps destruction while fighting is better than slow death while kneeling." It extended one of its 4 hands. "I am called Chirik. I speak for the Vrillani resistance. We will help you." 2 more meetings followed over the next 3 days. The Dothic representative was an amphibious creature named Coral, whose people lived on water worlds that the Kethran used for industrial waste dumping. The crystalline accord sent a being that looked like living glass, shifting colors as it communicated through patterns of light that Katie's translator converted to words. Its people had been forced to mine their own sacred crystal formations to fuel Kethran weapons. All 3 species agreed to coordinate with humanity. All 3 had been waiting for this chance. While Katie built alliances in the shadows of Meridian Hub, Chief Engineer Samuel Park worked without sleep at the Titan shipyards orbiting Saturn. The massive construction facility had been building civilian transports and mining vessels for decades. Now, it had been converted entirely to military production. Samuel stood before a prototype weapon that his team had assembled in just 11 days. It did not look impressive. It was a cylinder about 3 meters long with cables running from both ends. But what it could do was revolutionary. "Run the test again," Samuel said to his assistant, a young man named Kevin Ross. Kevin activated the device. A pulse of energy shot across the testing chamber and struck a communication relay that they had purchased from a Moravian trader. The relay did not explode or melt. Instead, its lights flickered wildly, and then it began broadcasting garbled signals that made no sense. Signal corruption at 94%, Kevin reported. The relay is still functional, but everything it sends or receives is useless noise. Samuel allowed himself a small smile. The Kethran have built their entire military around instant communication between their command centers and their ships. Every order flows through relays like this one. He patted the cylinder gently. When we hit their relay network, their fleet will become 400 ships that cannot talk to each other or to their commanders. They will figure it out eventually, Kevin said. They will find workarounds. Eventually, Samuel agreed. But eventually is not immediately. And in the gap between those two things, we will change the galaxy. On Earth, Director Patricia Lang sat in her office surrounded by screens showing intelligence reports from 100 sources. She had been analyzing Kethran military doctrine for 2 weeks, and she had found what she was looking for. The Kethran were powerful because they were unified. Every ship, every soldier, every commander followed orders from Imperial Command without question. This made them incredibly efficient. When High Commander Vorath gave an order, 1,000 ships moved as one, but it also made them brittle. Patricia pulled up a map of Kethran space, showing the locations of their communication relay stations. There were 47 major relays that carried military traffic across the Empire. Destroy or disable those relays, and the Kethran war machine would become blind and deaf. She sent her findings to Admiral Mitchell with a simple note: cut the head off, and the body cannot fight. Mitchell received the message aboard her flagship, the carrier Defiance, currently positioned near the human colony of New Eden. She studied the intelligence report and began planning the operation that would become known as Blackout across human space. Quiet evacuations were underway. Civilian transports carried families away from the 3 threatened colonies, while military vessels took their places in hidden positions. The Kethran observers watching from the border saw exactly what they expected to see: a weak species preparing to flee. They did not see the stealth frigates slipping through the gaps in their sensor networks. They did not see the weapons being loaded onto ships that were supposed to be cargo haulers. They did not see the messages passing between human intelligence officers and resistance. Cells on conquered worlds. Captain Henry Cole commanded the stealth frigate Silent Runner. He was 38 years old, 10 years younger than his brother Daniel, and he had spent his entire career preparing for a fight that everyone told him would never come. Now it was coming, and he was ready. His ship carried 6 of Samuel Park's quantum disruptors. His target was a relay station deep inside Kethran space, one of the most heavily protected communication nodes in the Empire. Getting there would require passing through 3 patrol zones without being detected. Getting out would require a miracle. Henry gathered his crew of 42, men and women, in the ship's small briefing room. "You all know what we are about to do," he said. "Command has given us permission to withdraw if the mission looks impossible. I want you to know that I will not be using that permission." He looked at each face in turn. "The Kethran have given us a choice between slavery and extinction. I choose neither. If any of you feel differently, speak now. There will be no shame in it." No one spoke. No one moved. Henry nodded slowly. "Then let us go teach the Kethran what happens when they threaten humanity." The Silent Runner slipped into faster-than-light travel, heading toward Kethran space. 11 other stealth frigates did the same, each with a different target, each carrying the same determination. On Meridian Hub, Katie Brooks sent a coded message to Admiral Mitchell. "A coalition is formed. 3 species will rise when you give the signal. On Titan shipyards. Samuel Park supervised the loading of quantum disruptors onto every available combat vessel on Earth. Patricia Lane coordinated the largest intelligence operation in human history, and on his throne aboard the Imperial Station, High Commander Vorath waited for the humans to surrender, never once considering that they might do anything else that the countdown to humanity's answer had begun. Ambassador Daniel Cole stood at the viewing window of his small shuttle as the massive Kethran Imperial Station grew larger against the stars. The station was bigger than anything humanity had ever built. It could hold 1 million souls within its rotating rings and armored sections. Daniel had seen images of it before, but seeing it with his own eyes made his stomach tight with worry. He was 53 years old and had spent 20 years as a diplomat. He had negotiated trade deals with the friendly Moravian traders. He had settled border disputes with the cautious Volani Collective. But he had never dealt with the Kethran Empire, and no human had ever been summoned to their imperial station before. The shuttle docked with a gentle thump, and Daniel straightened his formal gray suit. His aide, a young woman named Rebecca Torres, handed him his diplomatic credentials. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Whatever happens in there," Daniel said quietly, "keep your face calm. They respect strength." Rebecca nodded and followed him through the airlock. The Kethran guards who met them were terrifying. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their scaled bodies covered in ceremonial armor that gleamed under the harsh lights. Their eyes were yellow with vertical black slits, and their mouths held rows of sharp teeth. They said nothing, simply turning and walking down the corridor. Daniel and Rebecca followed. The Imperial Chamber was a vast, circular room with a domed ceiling that showed the stars above. Hundreds of Kethran officials sat in rising tiers around a central platform. On a raised throne at the far end sat a figure larger than the rest, his scales darker and marked with ritual scars that showed his countless victories in battle. High Commander Vorath, supreme military leader of the Kethran Empire. Daniel walked to the center platform and bowed his head slightly. Not too deep. Humans did not grovel. "Ambassador Cole," Vorath said, his voice deep and rumbling through the translation device on Daniel's collar. "You have come quickly. Good. This will not take long. The United Colonial Government is always ready to discuss matters with the Kethran Empire." Daniel replied carefully. Vorath made a sound that might have been laughter. "Discuss. Yes. Your kind loves to discuss. To talk. To delay." He leaned forward on his throne. "There will be no discussion today, human. Only terms." Daniel felt the cold creeping up his spine, but he kept his face still. "Terms for what, High Commander?" "Your species has expanded into territory that holds great value. The worlds you call New Eden, Prosperity, and Titan's Gate sit above mineral deposits that the Empire requires." Vorath's yellow eyes fixed on Daniel without blinking. "You will surrender these 3 colonies to Imperial control within 30 standard days." The chamber was silent. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. "And if we refuse?" he asked. Vorath spread his massive arms wide. "Then we will take them. And we will not stop there. We will burn every human world until your species exists only in memory. We have done this 47 times before to races far older and stronger than yours." Daniel thought of his wife Margaret back on Earth. He thought of his brother Henry serving on a patrol ship near the border. He thought of the 8 billion humans scattered across 12 small colony worlds. "I must consult with my government," Daniel said. "This is not a decision I can make alone." "Of course it is not," Vorath replied with contempt. "Your kind cannot make decisions. You debate and vote and waste time with democracy." He waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Go back to your little council. Tell them what I have said. But understand this, Ambassador. In 30 days, my fleet will move. If you have not surrendered, we will show you why the galaxy fears the Kethran. Daniel bowed his head again, just slightly. "I will deliver your message, High Commander." He turned and walked out of the chamber with Rebecca at his side. Neither of them spoke until they were back on the shuttle and away from the station. "They cannot be serious," Rebecca whispered. "That would be genocide." "They are completely serious," Daniel said heavily. "The Kethran have destroyed entire civilizations before. They see it as natural. The strong consume the weak." He sat down and closed his eyes. "Send an encrypted message to Earth. Emergency priority. The Colonial Council must convene immediately." 18 hours later, Daniel stood before the full Colonial Council in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva. The recording of his meeting with Vorath played on the massive screens, and he watched the faces of the council members as they saw the High Commander deliver his ultimatum. When the recording ended, silence filled the hall. "They outnumber us almost 10 to 1 in ships," said Admiral Grace Mitchell from her seat at the military section. She was a tall woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. "They have over 3,000 colony worlds providing resources. A direct military confrontation would be suicide." "Then we must surrender the 3 worlds," said Councilman Peters from the economic section. 3 colonies against the survival of our species is no choice at all." "If we surrender," said Director Patricia Lane from Intelligence, "they will simply demand more. This is how they operate. They test for weakness, and when they find it, they exploit it until nothing remains." The debate went on for hours. Voices rose and fell. Some demanded surrender. Some demanded war. Some demanded that humanity flee to the far edges of explored space. Finally, Admiral Mitchell raised her hand for silence. "There is another option," she said. "The Kethran are powerful, but they have a weakness that their arrogance has blinded them to." She stood and walked to the center of the chamber. "They have conquered dozens of species, but they have never truly defeated them. Those species still exist under Kethran rule, and they hate their masters." Daniel felt something stir in his chest. "You want to start a rebellion?" "I want to start several rebellions," Mitchell replied. "Simultaneously, while we hit their communication network so hard that they cannot coordinate a response." She looked around the chamber. The Kethran rely completely on centralized command. Their captains cannot act without orders from above. If we break their chain of command while their subjects rise against them, their entire empire becomes chaos. "That is insane," Peters said. "We have 43 warships. They have 400. 43 ships that can act independently," Mitchell said. 400 that cannot. In the right conditions, that difference matters more than numbers. The council voted at midnight. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would not flee. Humanity would teach the Kethran Empire a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for 1,000 years. As Daniel left the chamber, Admiral Mitchell fell into step beside him. "Your brother Henry," she said. "He commands a stealth frigate, does he not?" "He does." "I am going to need him," Mitchell said. "I am going to need every ship and every person who understands that some things are worth more than survival." Daniel nodded slowly. "I will contact him tonight." "Good." Mitchell paused at the door. "Ambassador, you did well today. You gave us time, and time is what we need." She smiled grimly. "Now we use it."